The Path of the Bodhisattva, 10 Stages of Awakening for Modern Hearts. Hello and welcome to this profound journey through one of Buddhism's most comprehensive guides to spiritual development, the 10 Stages, or Dasa Bhumika, from the Avatamsaka Sutra. Today we'll explore how these ancient teachings about the Bodhisattva path offer a complete roadmap for personal growth, emotional maturity, and spiritual awakening that speaks directly to the challenges and opportunities of modern life. If you've ever wondered what it really means to live a meaningful life, how to transform your natural capacity for love into genuine wisdom, or how personal growth can serve not just yourself but all beings, then these teachings hold treasures for you. The 10 stages represent a systematic understanding of how consciousness evolves from ordinary self-concern to the complete freedom and compassion of a fully awakened being. But this isn't just an ancient text about spiritual attainment in some distant monastery. These stages describe a journey that every human being can undertake, using the circumstances of ordinary life as the very means of transformation. Whether you're a parent struggling to balance love with appropriate boundaries, a professional trying to find meaning in your work, or someone facing life's inevitable challenges with courage and grace, the Bodhisattva path offers both inspiration and practical guidance. The word bodhisattva combines bodhi, meaning awakening or enlightenment, with sattva, meaning being or creature. A bodhisattva is literally an awakening being, someone who has dedicated their life to achieving complete enlightenment not just for themselves but for the benefit of all conscious beings. This might sound impossibly altruistic, but it actually represents the natural flowering of human maturity when we see through the illusion that our happiness can be separated from the welfare of others. What makes the 10 stages so remarkable is that they map out exactly how this transformation happens, stage by stage, challenge by challenge, realization by realization. They show us that becoming a bodhisattva isn't about suddenly becoming perfect, but about a gradual process of growth that honors both our human limitations and our infinite potential. Each stage represents both a level of understanding and a quality of heart that naturally emerges as we mature spiritually. Joy, illumination, patience, skillful action, presence, wisdom, and ultimately the complete freedom to serve all beings, these aren't just ideals to admire, but actual capacities that can be developed through dedicated practice and genuine commitment to growth. The path of the Bodhisattva speaks to something deep in the human heart, the recognition that our individual happiness is intimately connected to the happiness of all life. When we truly understand this, helping others becomes not a burden or obligation, but a natural expression of our own deepest fulfillment. We discover that the love we offer others is actually the love we most need ourselves, and that the wisdom we share becomes the foundation of our own peace and freedom. This understanding that individual and universal welfare are inseparable is what makes the Bodhisattva path so relevant to our modern world. We live in an era where the interconnectedness of all life is becoming increasingly obvious through global communication, environmental challenges, and economic systems that span the entire planet. The ancient bodhisattva ideal of working for the benefit of all beings is no longer just a spiritual aspiration, but a practical necessity for our collective survival and thriving. The path we'll explore today offers hope for anyone who has ever felt that their personal struggles are meaningless, or that their individual efforts to grow and heal don't matter in the larger scheme of things. The 10 stages reveal that every step you take toward greater wisdom, compassion, and freedom contributes to the awakening of all consciousness. Your personal healing becomes part of the healing of the world, and your individual growth serves the growth of all life. So let's begin this journey together, opening our hearts to teachings that have guided countless beings toward lives of profound meaning, unshakable peace, and boundless love. The path of the Bodhisattva is calling to you, not as something foreign or difficult, but as the natural direction of your own deepest aspirations for a life well lived. The journey of the Bodhisattva begins with what the Avatamsaka Sutra calls the arising of Bodhicitta, the awakening of the compassionate intention to achieve complete enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. This isn't just a nice thought or philosophical position, but a fundamental shift in motivation that changes everything about how you approach your life and your relationships with others. Bodhicitta often arises spontaneously when you recognize that your own happiness is inseparably connected to the happiness of all life. Maybe you're holding a sleeping child and suddenly realize that this tender love you feel could extend to all beings. Maybe you're moved by a news story about suffering somewhere in the world and feel not just sympathy but a deep determination to do something meaningful to help. Maybe you experience a moment of natural joy in a beautiful landscape and recognize that this same capacity for joy exists in every conscious being. However it arises, Bodhicitta transforms your spiritual practice from something you do just for yourself into something you do for the welfare of all life. Your meditation becomes not just personal stress relief, but training in the clarity and compassion that will enable you to serve others more skillfully. Your efforts to heal your own emotional patterns become part of learning how to help others with their struggles. Your pursuit of wisdom becomes preparation for being genuinely helpful in a world that desperately needs wise guidance. The 10 stages provide a detailed map of how this bodhisattva motivation unfolds and matures over time. They show us that becoming someone who can truly benefit all beings isn't a matter of suppressing your own needs or pretending to be perfect, but of gradually developing the wisdom, skills, and inner stability that make genuine service possible. Each stage has 3 aspects that work together. First, there's the particular understanding or realization that characterizes that level of development. Second, there's the emotional quality or virtue that naturally emerges from that understanding. And third, there are the specific practices and activities that both express and further develop that stage of realization. What's particularly beautiful about this framework is that it honors the full spectrum of human development. The early stages acknowledge that you need to develop a healthy relationship with yourself before you can serve others effectively. The middle stages show how personal maturity and spiritual insight support each other. The advanced stages reveal how individual awakening naturally flowers into universal compassion and skillful action. Contemporary psychology has developed similar frameworks for understanding human development that parallel these ancient teachings in remarkable ways. Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs shows how basic security and self-esteem must be established before higher capacities like creativity and self-actualization can emerge. Lawrence Kohlberg's stages of moral development trace how ethical reasoning evolves from self-interest through conventional morality to universal principles of justice and compassion. Developmental psychology has also shown us that healthy growth requires both individual autonomy and genuine connection with others. The Bodhisattva path reflects this same understanding, showing how personal freedom and universal compassion develop together rather than in opposition to each other. The psychiatrist and spiritual teacher David Hawkins mapped what he called levels of consciousness that correspond closely to the Bodhisattva stages, from the lower levels characterized by shame, guilt, and fear, through the middle levels of courage, acceptance, and reason, to the highest levels of love, joy, and peace. His research suggested that each level represents not just a different way of thinking, but an entirely different quality of experience. What makes the Bodhisattva path particularly relevant for our time is its integration of personal development with social engagement. Unlike spiritual paths that emphasize individual liberation separate from worldly involvement, the Bodhisattva ideal shows how inner development naturally leads to more skillful and compassionate engagement with the challenges of the world. This means that your spiritual practice becomes not an escape from responsibility, but a preparation for greater responsibility. Your meditation helps you respond to difficult situations with wisdom rather than reactivity. Your work on healing your own emotional patterns helps you support others through their difficulties without being overwhelmed. Your cultivation of inner peace becomes the foundation for being a source of stability in times of chaos and uncertainty. The Bodhisattva path also offers a different relationship to the inevitable challenges and setbacks of life. Instead of seeing difficulties as obstacles to your spiritual development, you begin to understand them as opportunities to develop the very qualities that will enable you to help others facing similar challenges. Your own struggles with fear become the basis for understanding how to help others work with anxiety. Your experiences with loss and grief deepen your capacity to offer comfort to those who are mourning. This doesn't mean you should seek out suffering or remain stuck in difficult patterns. Rather, it means that whatever you're experiencing can become part of your training in compassion and wisdom if you approach it with the right understanding and intention. Every challenge becomes a chance to develop patience, every conflict an opportunity to practice forgiveness, every moment of confusion a call to cultivate clarity. The path of the Bodhisattva is ultimately about discovering that your deepest personal fulfillment comes not from getting what you want for yourself, but from developing the capacity to be genuinely helpful to all life. This isn't self-sacrifice or martyrdom, but the recognition that your own heart is most at peace when it's expressing its natural capacity for wisdom and love in service to the greater good. The first three stages of the Bodhisattva path represent the foundation of genuine spiritual development, where initial enthusiasm for growth gradually deepens into stable wisdom and the beginning of real skill in helping others. These stages address some of the most fundamental challenges that anyone faces when beginning to take their inner development seriously. The first stage is called pramudita, or the joyful stage, and it represents the incredible happiness that comes from finally finding a meaningful direction for your life. This is the joy of someone who has been wandering without purpose and suddenly discovers a path that speaks to their deepest values and aspirations. It's the relief of no longer having to pretend that material success or social approval can provide lasting fulfillment. When you enter this stage, there's often a sense of coming home to yourself, of finally being honest about what really matters to you, you might have spent years pursuing goals that never quite satisfied you, wondering why achievements that looked so important from the outside left you feeling empty. The arising of genuine spiritual aspiration brings tremendous relief because you finally have a direction that aligns with your heart's deepest longings. This joy is not superficial happiness or emotional excitement, but a profound contentment that comes from knowing you're living in accordance with your true nature. It's like the satisfaction of a plant finally receiving proper sunlight and water after struggling in poor conditions. Your whole being relaxes into the recognition that you're finally moving in the right direction. But this stage also involves significant challenges. The joy of spiritual discovery can sometimes lead to spiritual pride or judgment of others who don't share your newfound enthusiasm. You might go through a period of wanting to convert everyone around you to your way of seeing things, or feeling frustrated when family and friends don't immediately understand the importance of the path you've discovered. The second stage is called Vimala, or the immaculate stage, and it represents the purification that naturally happens when you commit seriously to inner development. This is where you begin the often difficult work of honestly examining your own patterns of thought, emotion, and behavior that create suffering for yourself and others. The word immaculate doesn't mean perfect, but rather pure in intention, like clear water that reflects whatever appears in it without distortion. At this stage, you develop the courage to see yourself clearly, including aspects of your personality that you might prefer to ignore or deny. This self-honesty is the foundation of all genuine growth, because you can't change patterns that you're not willing to acknowledge. This stage often involves what spiritual traditions call purification, which can be challenging but is ultimately liberating. You might go through periods of intense emotion as suppressed feelings come to the surface. You might become aware of unconscious habits of thinking that have been creating problems in your relationships. You might recognize ways that you've been deceiving yourself about your motivations or avoiding responsibility for your choices. Contemporary therapy understands this same process through concepts like making the unconscious conscious, and integration of shadow material. The psychologist Carl Jung recognized that psychological maturity requires acknowledging and integrating aspects of ourselves that we've disowned or projected onto others. This is never comfortable, but it's essential for developing genuine self-acceptance and the capacity to relate to others with authenticity. The third stage is called Prabhakari, or the illuminating stage, where the clarity gained through honest self-examination begins to flower into genuine wisdom. You start to see patterns not just in your own mind, but in the nature of mind itself. You begin to understand how suffering is created through attachment, aversion, and delusion, and you develop skill in working with these universal human tendencies. This illumination often brings tremendous compassion for yourself and others because you realize that everyone is struggling with the same basic challenges of being human. The anger, fear, and confusion that you've worked so hard to understand in yourself are revealed as universal experiences that every conscious being faces. This recognition naturally leads to greater patience and kindness in your relationships. At this stage, you also begin to develop what Buddhism calls skillful means, the ability to adapt your communication and actions to what will be most helpful in different situations. You learn that the same truth might need to be expressed differently depending on who you're talking with and what they're ready to hear. You become more discerning about when to speak and when to listen, when to offer advice, and when to simply provide supportive presence. These first 3 stages establish the foundation for everything that follows. The joy of finding meaningful direction motivates you to continue even when the path becomes challenging. The purification of honest self-examination gives you the clarity to see reality more accurately, and the illumination of growing wisdom provides the foundation for genuinely helping others. What's particularly important to understand is that these stages are not linear achievements that you complete once and never return to. You might experience the joy of the first stage many times as you discover new depths of meaning in your practice. You might find yourself returning to the purification work of the second stage whenever life presents new challenges that reveal previously hidden patterns. And the illumination of the third stage continues to deepen throughout your entire spiritual development. The practical implication is that you can begin working with these stages wherever you are in your current life circumstances. You don't need to wait for perfect conditions or complete preliminary training. If you feel drawn to living a more meaningful life, you're already touching the first stage. If you're willing to look honestly at your own patterns of thought and behavior, you're engaging the second stage. If you're developing greater understanding of how your mind works and how to work with it skillfully, you're entering the third stage. These early stages also emphasize the importance of community and guidance on the spiritual path. The joy of discovery needs to be shared with others who understand its value. The challenges of purification are much easier to navigate with the support of teachers or fellow practitioners who have faced similar difficulties, and the development of wisdom is greatly enhanced by dialogue with others who are committed to the same process of growth and awakening. The 4th through 6th stages of the Bodhisattva path represent a crucial transition from primarily focusing on your own development to beginning to serve others with real skill and wisdom. These middle stages show how personal maturity naturally flowers into the capacity for genuine helpfulness, and they address many of the challenges that arise when you begin to take responsibility for the welfare of others. The 4th stage is called Arkishmati, or the radiant stage, where the wisdom developed in earlier stages begins to shine forth naturally in your daily interactions. This is where you learn to embody spiritual understanding rather than just thinking about it intellectually. The insights that once required concentrated effort to access become more spontaneous and integrated into your ordinary way of being. At this stage, people often begin to notice that others are naturally drawn to them for advice, comfort, or simply the peaceful presence they seem to radiate. You might find that friends and family start coming to you with their problems, or that strangers feel comfortable sharing their struggles with you. This isn't because you're trying to be a teacher or helper, but because your own inner stability creates a safe space where others can explore their difficulties. This can be both gratifying and overwhelming. The gratification comes from discovering that your spiritual practice is actually bearing fruit in ways that benefit others. The overwhelm can come from realizing that people's needs are vast, and your capacity to help while growing is still limited. Learning to serve others without burnout becomes a crucial skill at this stage. The 5th stage is called Sudurjaya, or the difficult-to-conquer stage, which refers to the challenge of maintaining equanimity and skillful action even in difficult circumstances. This is where you learn to respond rather than react, to maintain your inner peace even when others around you are agitated or hostile. The difficulty to conquer doesn't mean you become hard or invulnerable, but rather that you develop the inner strength to remain open-hearted even when it would be easier to close down. You learn to stay present with others, pain without being overwhelmed by it, to offer help without attachment to whether your help is accepted, and to maintain compassion even for people who are behaving in harmful ways. This stage often involves learning to work skillfully with anger, both your own and others. You discover that anger often contains important information about boundaries that need to be set or injustices that need to be addressed, but that reactive anger usually makes situations worse rather than better. You develop the capacity to access the clarity that anger can provide while responding from a place of wisdom rather than reactivity. Contemporary psychology recognizes this same development through concepts like emotional regulation, distress tolerance, and what Daniel Goleman calls emotional intelligence. Research shows that the ability to remain calm and thoughtful under pressure is one of the most important factors in effective leadership, satisfying relationships, and personal well-being. The sixth stage is called Abhimukhi, or the face-to-face stage, where you begin to perceive reality more directly, with less filtering through conceptual thinking and emotional reactivity. This is often described as coming face-to-face with the true nature of existence, seeing the interdependence and emptiness that underlies all appearances. At this stage, your understanding of spiritual principles becomes much more experiential and less theoretical. Instead of thinking about concepts like impermanence, interdependence, and the illusory nature of the separate self, you begin to perceive these truths directly in your everyday experience. This shift from intellectual understanding to direct perception transforms how you relate to everything in your life. This direct perception often brings tremendous freedom because you stop taking your thoughts and emotions so seriously. You see that they're arising and passing away in the space of awareness like clouds in the sky, real but not permanent, meaningful but not ultimate. This doesn't make you indifferent to your experiences, but it gives you the space to choose how to respond, rather than being automatically driven by whatever thoughts and emotions arise. This sixth stage also typically involves a deepening understanding of what Buddhism calls emptiness, or shunyata, the recognition that while everything exists and functions, nothing has the kind of independent, permanent existence that we usually imagine. This isn't a philosophical position, but a lived recognition that changes how you experience yourself and your relationships. When you recognize the emptiness of your own fixed identity, you become much more flexible and creative in how you respond to different situations. You're no longer so invested in maintaining a consistent self-image or defending a particular identity. This freedom allows you to respond more authentically to what each moment requires, rather than being limited by ideas about who you're supposed to be. These middle stages represent what many psychological traditions recognize as the transition from adolescence to true adulthood. Not just biological or legal adulthood, but psychological and spiritual maturity. You move from being primarily concerned with your own needs and development to being genuinely capable of considering the welfare of others in your decision-making. This doesn't mean you become selfless in the sense of having no needs or preferences, but rather that your sense of self expands to include others. You begin to experience others' happiness as genuinely connected to your own, not because you're trying to be altruistic, but because you're starting to see through the illusion that your welfare is separate from theirs. The practical implications of these stages are profound for how you approach relationships, work, and life decisions. In relationships, you become more capable of genuine intimacy because you're less defended and less reactive. You can listen to criticism without being crushed and offer feedback without being aggressive. You can love without trying to control and receive love, without losing your independence. In work, you begin to find ways to serve others through whatever profession you're in. Whether you're a teacher, business person, artist, or homemaker, you start to see your work as an opportunity to contribute to others' well-being rather than just a way to meet your own needs. This doesn't necessarily mean changing careers, but it often means approaching your current work with a different motivation and awareness. These stages also typically involve developing what psychologists call metacognitive awareness, the ability to observe your own thinking processes. You become aware not just of what you're thinking, but how you're thinking, not just what emotions you're experiencing, but how you relate to those emotions. This observer self provides tremendous freedom because you're no longer completely identified with whatever mental and emotional content arises. The 7th through 9th stages of the Bodhisattva path represent the flowering of mature wisdom and compassion, where your capacity to serve others becomes truly skillful and your understanding of reality reaches profound depths. These are the stages where you become what many traditions call a spiritual elder, someone whose presence and guidance can genuinely transform others' lives. The 7th stage is called Durangama, or the far-reaching stage, where your ability to help others extends far beyond your immediate circle of family and friends. This doesn't necessarily mean you become famous or develop a large following, but rather that your influence begins to ripple outward in ways that you might never fully know or understand. At this stage, people often discover that their words and actions have impacts far beyond what they intended or expected. A casual conversation might plant seeds that transform someone's entire life direction. A moment of kindness might give someone the hope they needed to continue through a difficult period. Your very presence might help others access their own inner peace and wisdom. This far-reaching influence comes not from trying to be influential, but from the authenticity and freedom that you've developed through your own inner work. People are naturally drawn to those who embody genuine peace and wisdom, and they're often inspired to develop these same qualities in themselves simply by witnessing that such development is possible. The 7th stage also involves developing what Buddhists call upaya, or skillful means at a very sophisticated level. You learn to adapt your teaching and helping to exactly what each person needs, sometimes offering comfort, sometimes challenge, sometimes information, sometimes simply silent presence. You become like a skilled doctor who can diagnose exactly what medicine each patient needs. This skill requires tremendous sensitivity and wisdom, because what helps one person might harm another. This same spiritual teaching that liberates one person might confuse someone else who isn't ready for that level of understanding. Learning to discern what each situation requires becomes an art that combines intuitive wisdom with practical experience. The 8th stage is called Akala, or the immovable stage, where you develop unshakable stability in your realization and your commitment to serving others. This doesn't mean you become rigid or inflexible, but rather that your fundamental peace and compassion can't be disturbed by changing circumstances or challenging situations. At this stage, you've developed what psychologists call resilience to an extraordinary degree. You can face loss, criticism, failure, or even physical danger without losing your center. This isn't because you've become emotionally numb or detached, but because you've found a source of stability that doesn't depend on external conditions. This immovability is particularly important for those who serve others in challenging circumstances, teachers working with difficult students, therapists helping people with severe trauma, activists working for social justice, parents raising children in difficult conditions, all need this kind of inner stability to remain effective and avoid burnout. The 9th stage is called sadhumati, or the good intelligence stage, where your wisdom becomes truly profound and your understanding of how to help others becomes almost effortless. At this level, you can see the deepest patterns and possibilities in any situation, and you know intuitively how to work with whatever arises to promote healing and awakening. This good intelligence is not just intellectual brilliance, but a kind of wisdom that integrates rational understanding with intuitive insight and compassionate motivation. You can see both the immediate needs of a situation and its deeper spiritual significance. You can work skillfully with practical problems while simultaneously addressing their underlying spiritual and psychological roots. People at this stage often develop what seems like miraculous insight into others' minds and hearts. They can see through surface presentations to the deeper struggles and potentials that people carry. They can often help others understand themselves better than they understand themselves, not through psychological analysis, but through a kind of direct perception of the true nature of consciousness. These advanced stages correspond to what various wisdom traditions recognize as the level of the sage, the wise elder, or the spiritual master. In psychology, this might correspond to what some researchers call post-conventional or integral levels of development, where the capacity for perspective-taking and moral reasoning transcends conventional social norms and cultural limitations. However, it's important to understand that reaching these levels doesn't mean becoming perfect or infallible. Even highly developed beings continue to learn and grow, and they remain humble about their understanding. What changes is not that they stop making mistakes, but that they relate to mistakes differently, seeing them as opportunities for deeper learning rather than threats to their identity. These stages also emphasize that advanced spiritual development naturally expresses itself in service to others. The more deeply you understand the nature of reality, and the more completely you embody wisdom and compassion, the more naturally you want to share these gifts with others who are struggling. It becomes impossible to remain satisfied with personal peace while others are suffering. The practical implication is that genuine spiritual advancement always includes growing capacity for helpful action in the world. Your meditation practice naturally leads to greater skillfulness in relationships. Your understanding of your own mind helps you guide others in understanding theirs. Your cultivation of inner peace becomes a source of stability that others can rely on during difficult times. What's particularly beautiful about these advanced stages is that they show how individual development and service to others become completely integrated. You're not choosing between your own growth and helping others. Rather, serving others becomes the natural expression of your own deepest realization, and continued growth becomes essential for serving others more effectively. These stages also highlight the importance of what Buddhists call merit and wisdom working together. Merit refers to the positive energy created through helpful actions, while wisdom refers to correct understanding of the nature of reality. At these advanced levels, every action becomes both an expression of wisdom and a way of creating positive energy that supports further awakening for yourself and others. The final two stages of the Bodhisattva path represent the culmination of spiritual development, where individual awakening reaches completion and naturally flowers into the capacity to serve all beings with perfect wisdom and limitless compassion. These stages show us what it means to achieve genuine spiritual freedom while remaining fully engaged with the world. The 10th stage is called Dharma Megha, or the cloud of Dharma stage. The image of a cloud is particularly beautiful because it suggests something that appears effortlessly and naturally provides nourishment for all life below. Just as rain clouds form when conditions are right and then generously pour forth water that sustains all vegetation, a being at this stage naturally emanates wisdom and compassion that nourish all who encounter them. At this level, teaching and helping others becomes as natural and effortless as breathing. You don't have to think about how to respond to different situations, because your understanding is so complete and your compassion so unconditional that the appropriate response arises spontaneously. Your very presence becomes a source of dharma, or spiritual teaching, even when you're not formally teaching. This doesn't mean you become a passive vessel for some external wisdom, but rather that your own understanding has become so clear and complete that it can respond freshly and appropriately to whatever arises. Like a master musician who has internalized their art so thoroughly that they can improvise beautifully without thinking, your response to life situations flows from deep wisdom rather than calculated thinking. People at this stage often seem to have access to exactly what others need to hear, whether that's comfort, challenge, practical advice, or profound spiritual insight. They can speak to children in ways that children understand, and to scholars in ways that engage their intelligence, not because they're trying to adapt their message, but because their understanding is so flexible and complete that it can express itself appropriately in any context. The 10th stage also represents complete fearlessness, not because external dangers don't exist, but because the fear of death, loss, or failure no longer has any power to disturb your fundamental peace. You've realized so completely that your essential nature is indestructible that you can face any situation with equanimity and appropriate action. This fearlessness enables a level of service that would be impossible for someone still concerned about their own safety and security. You can speak truth to power, comfort people in extreme situations, and take appropriate risks to help others, because your own well-being doesn't depend on external conditions. Beyond the 10th stage lies what is called Buddhahood, the complete and perfect awakening that represents the ultimate goal of the Bodhisattva path. At this level, the boundaries between self and others, individual and universal, relative and absolute, have been completely transcended while remaining fully functional for the sake of serving all beings. A Buddha is someone who has realized the deepest possible understanding of the nature of reality while developing the most complete possible expression of wisdom and compassion. They can perceive the needs and potentials of countless beings simultaneously and respond to each one in exactly the way that will be most beneficial for their spiritual development. But perhaps most importantly for our purposes, Buddhahood represents the complete integration of awakening with activity in the world. A Buddha doesn't retreat from worldly involvement, but engages with it from a place of perfect freedom and unlimited love. They show us that the highest spiritual attainment doesn't lead away from caring for others, but toward the most skillful and compassionate engagement possible. The traditional teachings describe a Buddha's activity as continuing endlessly, manifesting in whatever forms are needed to help beings achieve awakening. This might be through formal teaching, but it might equally be through apparently ordinary interactions that plant seeds of wisdom in people's minds, or through influence on cultural and social developments that create conditions more favorable for spiritual growth. What makes these final stages so inspiring is that they show us the ultimate potential that exists within every conscious being. The capacity for perfect wisdom and unlimited compassion isn't something foreign that needs to be imported from outside, but represents the full flowering of potentials that already exist within your own consciousness. This doesn't mean that everyone will achieve Buddhahood in this lifetime, but it does mean that every step you take toward greater wisdom, compassion, and freedom is a step in that direction. Every moment of genuine kindness, every flash of clear understanding, every act of selfless service contributes to the awakening of consciousness, both in yourself and in the world. Contemporary psychology and neuroscience have begun to study people who seem to embody some of these advanced qualities. Research on individuals like the Dalai Lama has shown that certain forms of meditation practice can literally reshape the brain in ways that increase capacity for compassion, emotional regulation, and what researchers call metacognitive awareness. Studies of people who have dedicated their lives to serving others have found that such service, rather than leading to burnout and exhaustion, actually tends to increase physical and emotional well-being when it comes from genuine motivation rather than obligation or guilt. This suggests that the Bodhisattva path's integration of personal development with service to others reflects deep truths about human nature and fulfillment. What's perhaps most important to understand about these final stages is that they're not distant goals that have no relevance to your current life, but represent the natural direction of the very impulses toward growth and service that you're feeling right now. Every moment when you choose compassion over indifference, wisdom over reactivity, or service over self-absorption, you're expressing the same enlightened qualities that reach their full expression in Buddhahood. The path of the Bodhisattva invites you to see your entire life as training for this ultimate service to all beings. Your current challenges become opportunities to develop patience and resilience. Your relationships become laboratories for practicing unconditional love. Your work becomes a way to contribute to the welfare of others. Your spiritual practice becomes preparation for being maximally helpful to a world that desperately needs wisdom and compassion. In this understanding, there's no separation between your personal growth and your service to others, no conflict between achieving your own freedom and working for the liberation of all beings. The path shows us that individual awakening and universal compassion are not just compatible, but are actually the same process seen from different angles. In our exploration of the 10 stages of the Bodhisattva path, we've journeyed through one of the most comprehensive and inspiring maps of human potential ever articulated. These ancient teachings show us that the capacity for profound wisdom, unlimited compassion, and skillful service to all beings isn't reserved for a few special individuals, but represents the natural direction of consciousness when it's allowed to develop fully. We began by understanding what it means to become a bodhisattva, someone who dedicates their life to achieving complete awakening for the benefit of all beings. Far from being an impossible ideal, this represents the natural flowering of human maturity when we recognize that our individual happiness is inseparably connected to the welfare of all life. We explored the first 3 stages, where initial joy and enthusiasm for spiritual development gradually deepens into honest self-examination and the beginning of genuine wisdom. These foundational stages show us that authentic spiritual growth requires both the courage to see ourselves clearly and the patience to work with our human limitations, with compassion rather than judgment. The middle stages revealed how personal development naturally flowers into the capacity to serve others skillfully. We saw how the radiance of inner peace naturally attracts others who are seeking healing and guidance, how challenges become opportunities to develop unshakable stability, and how direct perception of reality's true nature provides the foundation for genuine helpfulness. The advanced stages showed us how wisdom and compassion can reach extraordinary depths, enabling far-reaching positive influence and the kind of spiritual mastery that can genuinely transform others' lives. These stages demonstrate that the highest levels of spiritual development don't lead away from engagement with the world, but toward the most skillful possible service to all beings. Finally, we glimpsed the ultimate fruition of the Bodhisattva path in the complete freedom and unlimited compassion of Buddhahood, where individual awakening and universal service become perfectly integrated. This isn't a distant goal that has no relevance to current life, but represents the natural endpoint of the very impulses toward growth and service that are already stirring in your heart. Perhaps most importantly, we've seen how these stages provide both inspiration and practical guidance for anyone who wants to live a meaningful life. Whether you're just beginning to question what really matters, working through personal challenges, developing your capacity to help others, or deepening your understanding of reality's true nature, the Bodhisattva path offers wisdom that can guide and support your journey. The 10 stages remind us that spiritual development is a gradual process that honors both our human limitations and our infinite potential. You don't need to be perfect to begin serving others, but you do need to remain committed to your own growth and learning. You don't need to have all the answers to offer genuine help, but you do need to approach others with humility and genuine care for their welfare. These teachings also show us that there's no conflict between working on yourself and working for others. In fact, the most effective service to others flows from inner stability, clarity, and compassion, while genuine service to others naturally deepens our own wisdom and spiritual development. Personal growth and helping others support each other in an upward spiral that benefits everyone. The Bodhisattva path is ultimately about discovering that your deepest fulfillment comes not from getting what you want for yourself, but from developing the capacity to be genuinely helpful to all life. This isn't self-sacrifice or martyrdom, but the recognition that your own heart is most at peace when it's expressing its natural capacity for wisdom and love. You can begin walking this path wherever you are right now, with whatever circumstances you're facing. If you feel drawn to living more meaningfully, you're already touching the joy of the first stage. If you're willing to look honestly at your own patterns of thought and behavior, you're engaging the purification work of the early stages. If you're developing greater skill in relationships and more capacity to help others, you're entering the middle stages. Most importantly, remember that the path of the Bodhisattva is not about becoming someone different from who you are, but about allowing who you really are to flower fully. The wisdom, compassion, and capacity for service that these stages describe aren't foreign qualities that need to be imported from outside, but represent the natural expression of consciousness when it's free from the limitations of fear, confusion, and self-centeredness. The path invites you to trust that the love you feel for others, however limited it might seem now, can grow into unlimited compassion. The understanding you've gained through your own struggles can develop into profound wisdom that helps countless others. The peace you've glimpsed in moments of stillness can become an unshakable foundation that remains stable even in the midst of chaos. What makes the Bodhisattva path so beautiful is that it honors the full spectrum of human experience. Your struggles become the foundation for understanding how to help others with their difficulties. Your mistakes become lessons in humility and compassion. Your moments of clarity become gifts that you can share with those who are confused. Nothing in your experience is wasted when it's held within the larger intention of serving all beings. The 10 stages also remind us that spiritual development is not a solitary journey, but happens within community and relationship. You need teachers and guides who have walked the path before you. You need fellow travelers who can support you through difficult passages and celebrate your discoveries. You need students and those you serve, who help you discover the depths of your own capacity for love and wisdom. In our modern world, where so many people feel isolated and wonder whether their lives really matter, the Bodhisattva path offers profound hope and direction. It shows us that every human life has infinite potential for contributing to the healing and awakening of all consciousness. Your individual growth matters not just for yourself, but for everyone whose life you touch. And their growth in turn serves the awakening of all life. The path also offers a different relationship to success and failure than our culture usually provides. Instead of measuring your worth by external achievements or comparing yourself to others, you can evaluate your progress by how much your heart has opened, how much wisdom you've gained through your experiences, and how skillfully you're able to serve others. These are measures that don't depend on circumstances beyond your control, but reflect the genuine work of spiritual development. Perhaps most importantly, the Bodhisattva path reveals that the love and service you offer to others is actually the love and service that you yourself most need. When you help others find peace, you discover peace. When you share wisdom with those who are confused, you clarify your own understanding. When you offer comfort to those who are suffering, you heal your own heart. This isn't a philosophical concept, but a lived reality that becomes more obvious the more deeply you engage the path. The ancient masters who mapped these 10 stages understood something that modern psychology is just beginning to discover, that human beings find their deepest fulfillment not through getting what they want for themselves, but through contributing to something larger than their individual concerns. The Bodhisattva path provides a systematic way to develop this capacity for meaningful service, while simultaneously achieving the personal freedom and peace that we all seek. As we conclude this exploration, remember that understanding these stages intellectually is just the beginning. The real path unfolds through actually living with the intention to develop wisdom and compassion for the benefit of all beings. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to practice patience, every challenge a chance to develop resilience, every moment of insight a gift to be shared with others. You don't need to wait until you feel ready or qualified to begin serving others. The Bodhisattva path shows us that you learn to serve by serving, develop wisdom by applying what understanding you have, and grow in compassion by practicing love even when it feels limited or imperfect. Your sincere intention to be helpful is already a precious contribution to the world, and it will naturally guide you toward greater skill and effectiveness. The path of the Bodhisattva is calling to you not as something foreign or difficult, but as the natural direction of your own deepest values and aspirations. It invites you to discover that the life you've always wanted to live, a life of meaning, love, and genuine contribution to others' welfare, is not only possible, but is actually the most practical way to find lasting happiness and peace. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the 10 stages of awakening. May these teachings inspire you to embrace your own potential for wisdom and compassion. May they guide you toward ever greater skill in serving all beings. And may they help you discover that the path of the Bodhisattva is not a burden to be carried, but a joy to be lived, a way of being that honors both your individual uniqueness and your fundamental connection to all life. In walking this path, you join an ancient lineage of beings who have dedicated their lives to the awakening of all consciousness. Your efforts matter. Your growth serves others, and your love contributes to the healing of our world. This is the profound gift and responsibility of being human, and it's a gift that's available to you in every moment of your life.